The High Evolutionary is a character with ties to lots of different Marvel characters. As I covered last week, he has a bit of a history with Adam Warlock, but he also has comics connections of varying degrees to the X-Men, Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver, Spider-Woman, Spider-Man, Werewolf by Night, and more. Funny enough, though, as far as I'm aware, he doesn't really have much history with the Guardians of the Galaxy, even though his quest for a perfect world is set to put him at odds with them this weekend. He also wasn't responsible for Rocket's modifications in the comics, if you were wondering. So the High Evolutionary, aka Herbert Wyndham, is a geneticist by trade, and his initial inspiration came from studying the work of one of my personal favorite X-Men villains, Mr. Sinister, but it wasn't until he received a bunch of advanced information from a secret Inhuman, of all things, that he was eventually able to begin his experiments in earnest. These experiments mostly took the form of advancing animals into more humanoid forms, most notably the New Men, and it's also why I can't blame them for making him Rocket's creator in the movies. It's too perfect not to use, honestly. The Evolutionary doesn't always work alone. He's had a couple of assistants through the years. One such helper was Jonathan Drew, the father of Spider-Woman, and it was partly through the help of Herbert's tech that she gained her weird and barely spider-related powers in the first place. Jonathan quit after they were attacked by a werewolf, the grandfather of Jack Russell, Werewolf by Night, and said attack prompted the High Evolutionary to create the protective armored look he's more known for now. Afterwards, he took on a new assistant, Miles Warren, who would later go on to become the cloning-obsessed villain known as the Jackal and send Spider-Man comics into a spiraling, convoluted mess back in the 90s with the Clone Saga. The High Evolutionary is also responsible for the empowerment of Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver, who were mutants in the comics for the longest time until editorial decided to change it to distance them from the X-Men back when Fox was still holding their movie rights. There's an anthropomorphic cow midwife involved in that side of the story, but I only have so much time to spend on these. Maybe we'll circle back to that another day. As far as morality goes, the High Evolutionary is something of a wild card. He's definitely not a good guy. He's clashed with the Avengers, the Champions, the New Warriors, and more, and his research definitely skews on the ethically reprehensible side. But occasionally he can do things that are, if not good, then at least beneficial, if only to satisfy his own scientific curiosity, or ensure his research can continue. He's also not to be confused with the Low Evolutionary, a resident of Counter-Earth working against him, or the Higher Evolutionary, a somewhat more benevolent clone of himself. I doubt either of them are showing up in Guardians 3, but comic naming schemes are fun, and I like to remind myself of that sometimes. Next week, I guess the subject depends on what happens and who shows up in the new Guardians movie. Thanks for watching, and stay tuned.